Here we are at Phoenix Square at the M4U convention in Leicester's Culture Court, and I'm catching up with Andrew Robertson. How are you?
Good.
Good. Well, welcome to Leicester, because you've come up from London, haven't you, for the convention?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing down in London on sort of day to day, and then how you use Mac's MSP software in there.
So I'm at the Centre for Digital Music at Queen Mary University of London, and I'm interested in the problem of synchronization, basically how you synchronize pre-recorded parts and technology in music performances. So things like following the timing and tempo of a performer. In particular, coming here, I've been presenting something called Beekeeper, which synchronizes Ableton Live with a drummer. And that basically means that you've got things like bass lines and pre-recorded parts following their tempo. That uses Mac's MSP in terms of a programming language. It's very versatile. You've got control over timing and events, and it works within Ableton Live, which a lot of DJs have become pretty adept at using, because you can throw almost all your music into it and beat match and stuff like that. Well, a lot of musicians have started to use it as well for the kind of potential that it has for live performance.
Now, a couple of the people I've interviewed, and particular friends who come from Rome, were saying that when people first look at Mac's and MSP, it's the blank screen that puts them off, and they get they're not quite sure. Whereas I think people are so used to having software that does stuff for them. Whereas with that, I think once you start putting elements into it, it seems to be the feedback from people. It really allows you to do what you want, rather than it dictating to you what you can do. Do you find that from what you do with the Beekeeper and other ways that you use it, it's quite liberating?
Yeah, I did used to think to myself that if you can think it, then in Mac you can probably do it. In that, if you can kind of conceptualize the problem to some extent, that you know what it should be doing or whatever, it gives you probably the kinds of tools that you need to solve it. Mainly those things are probably things like audio input, video input, you've got matrices and stuff to hold things. You can program in languages, so you can do the rules of like, if I get this thing, then I want to do that. But you're basically operating in a classic design of input and output. You've got sensing input in whatever form that is, and then that does something that's output to the world. So assuming your thing you want to do is something like that, of that form, that will work. Jeremy Bernstein did a PowerPoint presentation in Mac, so I guess it's even possible to do that.
Is that versatile?
Yeah, I was quite jealous when I saw it. I thought that would have been good. That would have saved me opening up that Keynote program as well, and then switching between them. I could just do that. And he was just hitting his bang, and he was doing PowerPoint. So, there is actually a great article by David Ziccarelli called "How I Learned to Love a Program That Does Nothing," because it is literally that blank canvas you mentioned, and it's a bit like Word. If you said you open up a Word document and you can write a book, but maybe you could, but you could write a load of rubbish and have to delete it. And I think it's kind of a sort of similar paradigm, but maybe for audio, MIDI, video, things like that.
Now, we spoke about you've had quite a varied career before you've arrived at what you're doing now, with various bits and pieces we spoke about. But is music something that's always been there throughout your life, and therefore you play in a band or those kind of things? All of a sudden it was there at that time, and then something like the software and the opportunity all came along at the right point to do what you're doing now?
I think it was. I mean, music has always been there since I stumbled on David Bowie performing in Serious Moonlight Tour on TV at about 14. But I worked on film. I've made films professionally as an actor and part of the film team, and then I was kind of I was sort of pursuing. I studied mathematics after that, and I played in a lot of bands and played in bands that were pressing play on devices, and we had to play along because we had this really cool bass line that was a sort of electro thing, and that never responded, and so because I'd heard of Queen Mary University, it was that drew me there, thinking, well, maybe that's an interesting thing to do at this point, to investigate that. And I suppose then it was only then that, say, I discovered that Max would be an appropriate way to do it. A friend of mine did say, hey, Max MSP, that's something you might be interested in a few years before. But when I checked it out, it had this huge document and all these weird boxes and numbers and stuff, and I couldn't figure out what I was meant to be doing with it. And then got diverted back to mixing tracks and doing whatever else conventionally. So I'd say, I guess, to anyone that's in that position, that possibly it's just a way of maybe doing some kind of interesting art projects that, I don't know, respond to something, respond to input, or it might remix a song for you depending on something you do with your hands, or you interact with something. We've had pieces here like maybe you've seen like Tarek Barry's thing where you're flying through space and these sounds are being made by objects that don't physically exist, but you're flying through them with a joystick. That's a really strange way to compose. Like a lot of songwriters just, they give you the song in a sequence or whatever, but here he's actually mirroring almost a universe of sound, and it's a very different experience. For one, it depends on you to actually experience anything, and yeah, there may be ways to sort of reinvent the way in which you explore sounds or receive sounds or interact in some sense with the media itself. So I suppose it's an interactive media kind of environment.
Right, last question. You were saying you go to lots of conferences and conventions around the world to do with various elements of computing and related to this kind of subject. How do you find only an hour and 15 minutes on the train from London, Leicester's Phoenix Square Film and Digital Media
Centre?
Centre?
I've really enjoyed it up here actually, and Sean's done a fantastic job of putting it on, and I think it's been nice. It's nice to sort of have a kind of a convention centred in a way on the programming and the programming environment. It frees it up from a lot of other things and allows the programmers to come together and just sort of share what they want to do. I know we've got a Super Collider thing happening that a friend of mine, Dan Stowell's, doing in London. I hope they do a similar thing there. But it's you can probably find that there is a strong shared interest, I think, and an interest, I guess, just in creativity, and people are coming in maybe to pick up a few tips and hopefully share those kind of ways that they might actually go about doing something. I mean, I think he's got a great lineup, so yeah.
He's done really well.
Yeah.
Andrew, thanks very much, mate. Appreciate it.
Cheers.